Good morning, everyone. Today is engine swap day. Something I've been looking forward to for a while. I know I've been promising people on the channel we're going to do. It's been a lot of odds and ends and nitpicky stuff to put this together, but it should be a pretty fun little motor. So to recap, we have a 2.8 liter all iron V6. This is the one that would have come stock in any Fiero. I think this is an 86-ish motor. I don't know, really don't. I can tell you, based on the crankshaft and something that we can get into, the flywheel on it is specific to this vehicle, or this motor. Let me pull these out. So like I might have touched on in other videos, the flywheel has a weight on the back of it. And this is because early motors, if you look at the crankshaft and you look at the way they're made, 1985 through 87, they're what are called externally balanced. So that means when GM made the crankshafts, they just welded a weight on the back of the flywheels or the flex plates to balance them. That's kind of crazy because they built them all with the same offset, and this is some old-timey stuff, but this is what they were doing. Well, I realized halfway through putting this together that it has that kind of crankshaft. Well, we're already there, and it's a lot of work, and I'm not going to go track down another crank or something. So I had to track down this flywheel from a buddy of mine, and that took a while to get this thing done. We were waiting on this flywheel for probably about 2 or 3 weeks because I had to take it. You can't find a machine shop anymore. They're gone. They all quit. All the old guys either died and got out of it, then I guess the younger guys got into drugs and stuff and quit doing machining parts. So there's just not many. I had to drive like 2 hours each way to drop this thing off. But that being said, so that's one component of it that just drug on and on and on. Then once I got that together, I realized I needed bolts for it because I didn't have crankshaft bolts to attach that to the crank. And I did some checking with some old bolts I had. The 4-cylinder, you'd be like, oh, just take them off it. No, the 4-cylinder uses a different thread pitch. The same size bolt. Why they have I don't know. So I had to buy bolts for that. That's fine. It took a little while. Had to track down exhaust manifold bolts. I got those. Still need to attach those all the way. Something else that took a while was wire harness stuff. So this wire harness that's on here, this is all actually for an automatic transmission, not a manual. Now, luckily, they're pretty much interchangeable, and I know this because I've done this too many times. And I ran my car for a long time with an automatic harness. I might still have an automatic harness. It's just hacked up. But basically, the only things are like this, which is the torque converter lockup solenoid. That's going to dangle. It's not going to matter. But the big thing that kind of needed to move was, and I can try and find the diagrams I used, but basically you have to switch the starter pin. The starter pin that goes into the harness for the car had to be switched over. I had to do a lot of wire splicing because I had basically pieced together a couple wire harnesses I had laying around. And that's what I've been doing for the past month on this thing, is just nitpicking all the little details and everything that needed to be done to put it in the car, which is great because now it's pretty much there. I've run out of stuff that I can list off that needs to be done outside the car that we can't just do once it's in here. But that brings us to the actual car itself, right? So it's not just swap the engine into it. That's easy enough to do, and we're going to do that, and that's actually what I'm looking forward to. What I need to do first, and I'm really not looking forward to, is the fuel system. So 4-cylinder cars, which this one is, used a return style system. It's the same fuel system pretty much, but they used a smaller pump. The pump only generated something like 18 or 20 psi because it's a throttle body injection system, and it only needed to make about 10 at the actual throttle body. This thing needs about 40, which is significantly more. So I got to change the fuel pump. Not a big deal. Tanking these isn't that bad, except for I'm almost certain that it is filled to the brim with gas. Because when we were using this car, it was, among all the other stuff we couldn't trust the fuel gauge. We had caught it a couple times at completely full and it was dead empty. So we just always put gas in it. So I am almost certain this thing has a full 12 gallons of tank, or 12 gallons of gas in it, because that's the biggest tank they ever made, which this has. Pretty sure it's got 12 gallons in it. And that's not ideal. So, but I do have a jerry can. I'm going to try and see if I can find a way to use its own system to pull some of that gas out. and then do that, and then hopefully tank's not too big. So we're gonna start off doing the job I don't want to do, which is the fuel pump. Drop the tank out of it, pull the fuel pump out of it, change it out, throw that back in here, and then we can get to all the other cool stuff, which is all the stuff going on back here with the swap. And then hopefully, all things go well. For you, it'll just be whenever this video is over, but for me, within a couple days, this thing will actually turn over, fire up, and we'll break it in and it'll run, and God willing, it won't flatten the camshaft. Because that's a thing. Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and grab the floor jack, pick this thing up, and we'll get after it and get the tank out of it and just get back to punishing myself again with all this nonsense. I don't know why I do this. Okay, so first things first, for the fuel pump, you gotta find the connector, and it will be buried somewhere back here. 6 cylinders and 4 cylinders of the same, like I said, same general layout. But you'll have to find, it's usually, for some reason I remember them being yellow. Maybe it's just a yellow wire, but there's a connection right here. It's gonna need to come undone. Like most of them, it's broken. So if this is like yours, a lot of times I think mine's broken too, and I just have like a bread tie or a zip tie holding it together, because if this disconnects while you're driving, no more fuel pump. In any case though, so that's going to need to be able to drop out. It'll pull out the bottom. We can get underneath now, and now it's just unhooking a few fuel lines, and everything pretty much comes out the bottom. The tanks on these are actually really easy to work with. It's just going to be a huge pain again that this one is, like I said, I'm fairly certain, completely full of gas, which is not fun. Mostly because of the mess, partially because it's heavy. But let's get underneath. I'll start showing you how to take the tank out. They give me the short version. I'll set you up when I go start actually doing this. But basically, this is the fuel tank. It runs down the center of the car, which gives some people pause if they don't really understand these things, but it's actually probably the safest place for it to be, because in order for that thing to get punctured by a collision, you're already dead. So the way these things come out, you basically got tank straps right here, and then another one further up here. You can see all the spiders running in fear. You've also got this kind of crossbar has got to come out. And then after that, it's just hoses. So back here, you can see we're going to need to disconnect them. Basically, you've got the main fill, which is that big one. I believe that's a vent on the left. And then up above it are going to be, or these ones actually hanging down, these are going to be the in lines, in and out lines for the tank. So it's like I said, it's a return system, and that's also where there's your fuel filter, and it runs up. So all that's basically the same, but the easy thing to do is remove the heat shield. It's just these little 7mm screws. Unhook all your lines, pull your center bar here, put a floor jack under that, and then you loosen up your tank straps, pull them out of the way, and this whole thing drops out the bottom. It's going to tug a little bit against these rubber lines, or these rubber covered lines. These are your these are coolant, I believe. And but you're going to need to kind of shimmy it past those. Honestly, the more full it is, the easier it's going to drop past them. So let me get you set up, and I'll crawl under here and start punishing myself. Pulling the tank out and getting started on this thing so that we can make it better. Okay, so this is your arrangement for just about all Fieros once you have this thing out. When you go to put all this back together, it's kind of a little bit of a mess trying to make sure that all of this gets sandwiched back in correctly. But basically the way it shakes out is you've got another vent right here. This is a small vent. This was not even connected on this one, which is not a surprise. And then you have your fuel lines. This one being the double clamped one is going to be your out. That's the one that goes to the motor. This is your return, the single clamp one that runs back in here. They're also, forget the sizes, but they're slightly different diameter fuel lines. There's your connection goes in. So what we need to do is knock, let's see, where's the little tab? Right here. With, of course, a non-sparking brass punch. Right? You're going to knock that around, and then this whole thing will come out. And then we'll be able to get at the actual fuel pump that we need to replace so that that engine will actually have enough fuel pressure to run. So let's get in here and start pulling it apart. So you've got these little tabs. Right around. And then now, seal is holding it. Seal was actually doing its job. This is a rare occasion. Wow, it rotted fast. I think our new one's got a new one. And it's pretty full. bad. Let me see if I can. Seems to be. Is that running? Might be running the pump in reverse. Let's try this. There we go. We're pumping gas. So now I just gotta sit here until either this jug fills up or this tank is empty. Okay. Done that now. Now if you do this, because I know a guy, legitimate true story, who did this with a pump that wasn't like good enough to run a car. He was doing a replacement, he did this into a 5-gallon bucket, and then didn't remove it from where he was working. The dude set the shop on fire and almost burned to death. So if you're doing this, put your cap back on and remove it from your workspace. Okay. But that's not all the gas in it, but it's definitely a lot of it. It's going to make this much more manageable when we go to put it back in. I'll pull this all out. You can see the guts. And this pump's not old. I only did this thing, I mean mileage-wise, I did it years ago, but it probably only has a few thousand miles on it. But this is what your sending unit looks like. Dribbling gas everywhere. But if you're dealing with, this is just diagnostic stuff for Fieros or cars in general. You have a condition where you have no fuel pressure. Go ahead and drop your tank. It's probably safe to bet it's the pump if you haven't done it recently. But bear in mind that this guy right here, this rubber line, this modern ethanol gas eats this stuff like crazy. I've had these where I swapped them brand new, and then 3 weeks later, I've got zero fuel pressure. I pull it down, this ruptured. And I just replaced it with like fuel line, and honestly got away with it. But this stuff is supposed to be designed to be immersed in fuel. Most fuel line is not actually designed to be actually immersed in it, and it'll just get eaten to pieces. And like I had bad luck once, but it's just a point to check. If your pump is still pumping and stuff like that, and you're like, man, I can hear it, I have no fuel pressure, you might have had that go bad. You also can have a sock that's clogged. These go bad. You can tell this one already has a hole in the bottom. Like I said, I'm pretty sure this one is only a few years old. So, crazy. But I hope I got a new stock. I hope. In any case, we'll figure that out. But let me start pulling this apart. See what all's in our kit. So, pump. Oh, we do. We have a sock. So we've got a replacement pump. We can put in here. They're the same general style. They're just made to flow more. Replacement connector, but I don't think we're going to need it. I think this one's going to work. Looks like they opted actually for just a section of fuel line to make that connection. Let's see what we decide to do. This, which is like a little spacer sealer thing, or gasket they put between the pump and the base plate here. Couple of clamps, new gasket for the top, and our sock. So we can get aggressive with this now. We don't have to try and save anything. Alright. Get these apart. It's raining outside. And you can keep these as like a transfer pump, I guess. But always bear in mind, like when you're doing anything with gasoline, it is flammable. Be cautious. Anything that generates a spark or could generate a spark. Even working right here, try not to throw your tools down too hard. Just be honest. We have a replacement pump. And being that this is holding up, I think we're just going to put it back on. Gasket's shaking up. And I'll put it away. very well clamped. You can take a pair of pliers and actually press them down, make sure they seal. Cool. But real quick reality check with it, and it spins. Because I have put down pumps in cars before. Make sure it spins. Yep. You may or may not have been able to hear that or see that, but it spins. Don't want to run them dry. You can avoid it. Yeah. Fun stuff. Alright. Snake it all down in here. Snap it into place. That an upgraded fuel pump. And truthfully, because these are return style systems, I think you could run a 6-cylinder pump in a 4-cylinder. It would just be returning like 70% of its flow. Okay, now we just put this bad boy back in and we'll be good to go. Installation is just reverse of the disassembly, so I'm not going to really annotate any of that. I'm just going to throw it back together. Alright, got the fuel pump back in, and I've already started it. The fuel pump is running. It's funny, it fires up and it revs up because it's getting way more fuel than it should. But, so I went ahead and started draining the coolant out of this thing, and didn't bore you with all those details, but basically on the bottom corner of this radiator there's a little drain screw, and I pulled it out, and you can see through there I've got a bucket down there to catch the antifreeze, and we're going to try and recycle it because any amount of money I can save on this will be good. But that brings us now to where we got to go next, which is actually removing this engine. So there's basically one way that you do this when you're at home, and that's all of this has to come out the bottom. So it's important to kind of have a game plan for how you're going to do that. I tend to like to start at the top and I will start pretty much on this side of the engine bay and go all the way around until basically I could run my hand around the entirety of the engine all the way to the ground in theory and not touch anything. So everything's disconnected. But to give you an idea, that's going to be like shifter cables, air intake tube, any wire harness to the body, which is back there primarily. All this comes off. Let's see. Wires to the battery, that stuff's going to have to come off and be disconnected. Over there, way in the back, which you really can't see, the air conditioning lines need to come off. Let's see. That's pretty much it up here. It's actually pretty simple. The dog bone's got to come loose. And then the next thing will be to pull the wheels. And what I think I'm going to do is disconnect the struts from the top up here. I've done it a couple different ways. But we'll disconnect the struts from up here. We'll pull the brake calipers off and hang them so we don't have to rebleed the brakes, hopefully. And then lastly is everything underneath, which is giving me a little bit of a pain. Basically, you need to take this exhaust system off. Not really because it's necessary for removal, but because it's going to be way easier to take it off right now with when it's in the air. We'll take the exhaust system off, and then basically this subframe is secured basically back here, up at the front, one other bolt, other bolts over there, and a bolt there, and we'll support it farther up with a floor jack and a big piece of roofing timber in the middle of the car. Raise it up, and then with everything disconnected, we'll drop it down and put the tail end of the car down on some roofing dollies, or not roofing dollies, furniture dollies. And then the whole weight of the car will be supporting that on those. You take the bolts loose at the back and the front, and then lift the whole car back up, and this whole subframe and everything will stay on the ground, and we can work with it. So, that being said, it's time to start pulling bolts, start pulling things apart. It's going to be fun. So, might be a little difficult for you to see all the way around here, but what I've done is disconnected everything from the top. And the way that I tend to do this is I go around the whole engine, all around the engine bay, and treat it like effectively I could run my hand between the engine and the ground. And if you can see, I mean, there's frame down there, but you can see like okay, there's nothing here. The fuel lines are disconnected. All the wiring to the back of the engine's disconnected. We've got the pulley, but none of that's hooked to the chassis. You can see straight down to the frame rail. Look all the way around. I've got my wires all bundled up here on top. If I look around, there's nothing else. Dog bones loose. Go around. These hoses have been disconnected so I can look straight to the ground. There's nothing here going to the body of the car that's at least accessible from the top. We still need to do the bottom. Go around. Shift cables are all bundled up over there. The clutch slave cylinder, which looks like sadly is leaking, but it's unhooked, or it's unbolted from the engine and transmission combo and moved over there. But we can see again, I can look all the way around the motor and transmission, and effectively nothing is attached to the body of the car, except for I do need to go ahead and pull that. That's the bulkhead connector where the PCM goes, so that needs to be pulled through. But then we're done up top. The AC lines, I'm not 100% certain if they're incompatible or not with a V6, and those are in okay shape. I'm going to leave them connected there, but I'm going to disconnect them on the compressor side back there. But I'll do that from the bottom. So last thing I need to do is go ahead and pull that bulkhead connector through. And once that's done, we're pretty much done from the top. The last thing pretty much we'll do before we start pulling things apart, we'll go to the bottom, we'll pull it all apart down there. We'll take these strut mount bolts out so that the struts can hang. They'll hang out of the body, and then we can support that. I'll show you how we're going to support it, and we can drop this whole thing out the bottom of the car. And it's pretty cool. So let me move on to pulling that bulkhead connector. We'll get underneath the car, start pulling the exhaust and everything else, and then we're that much closer. How much of this is actually disconnected fast? Is this all still attached? So just kind of in here. Favorite mod, quick disconnect center console. Okay. So this is the ECM that's in here. This is where your computer is, and this is where we're going to be switching it out with this computer. This is a 6-cylinder computer, but this is the one that's in here currently. It's a 4-cylinder. Apparently, it's a rebuilt AC Delco unit. Go ahead and unhook it. Take some fighting over it. You gotta kind of push the connectors back in, depress the latch, and pull them, walk them out. Alright. But you can also tell, you're not going to get these mixed up if you are doing a swap like this. As near as I can tell, all the 4-cylinder ones connect from the side, the 6-cylinder units connect from the bottom. You're just going to need a donor, and your harness is not going to connect. If it's a 6-cylinder harness, it's not going to connect to the 4-cylinder. So we need to disconnect. This is the engine side. This is the body side. We just need to disconnect the engine side from the car. So what we need to do is unhook this guy, and there's 2 7mm screws here. Disconnect this, and the whole thing pops out the back here and goes with the motor. We get a couple tools, pull it apart. First, let's disconnect the engine from the body harness. It's just a couple clips on either side. And we just got to work it off. 7s. Okay. I figured out it does have, careful peeling this up too. These are, I think they're finally reproducing these skeletons as part of their sheet. In any case, there's a separate connection here. Right up. I'm not used to seeing, that's why it kind of caught me off guard. This is the only car I've ever had. Well, my other car that I've taken apart a lot more, I should say, actually. Probably didn't, well, no, it didn't have this. I think this is a connection for the gauge pod up here. So, which may or may not work after this, because I'm pretty sure this harness I'm using doesn't have it. We'll see. In any case, that's not correct. So, got all this stuff. This is all just going to push through. Go out with the motor. It's easier to push it through usually from this side, because these connectors will all get stuck. Even though in my case here, I don't think anyone's going to use this 4-cylinder harness ever. I'd rather not break things just for the sake of breaking them. So ease it through and get all your pigtail connections through, and we'll wrap it up on top of the engine, and it can drop right out the bottom of it. But our new computer, I'm not going to do it right now, but it's going to bolt right in here, and everything's going to plug into it, and we should be good to go. So we're into the car now. So the way I usually like to handle this, I like to pull the exhaust underneath the car first. Mostly it's because it's more easily accessible. We don't have, once this subframe is on the ground, we're not going to have nearly as much access. We also want to remove, or at the very least loosen, like these right here, which are motor mount or transmission mount bolts. Also got another set up in here behind the parking brake that are going to have to come loose. Also got the ones up here at the front. Let's see if you can, right here. Those are going to have to come out as well. But the reason you primarily want to remove those is so that once you have all of this on the ground, you're not fighting underneath it to get a wrench under there. You can just pick the whole thing up and off. And while it's physically still sitting in here, gravity will hold it. It's not like it's going anywhere. But once all this stuff is disconnected underneath and removed, we can start messing with the strut mounts. We're also going to get you up in here. It's real tight. We're also going to need to remove that guy. That's the AC compressor hose. We leave the AC compressor on, that's fine, but that hose runs over and is still connected up there to the chassis. So we need to remove that. At least disconnect it at the engine, and then it can stay in there, at least for now. But other than that, it's pretty simple. It's really not very complicated. So let me get under here, start pulling bolts. There's those nasty spring bolts that are holding the lower pipe to the engine. And we gotta pull all these hanger springs off. Just get this 4-cylinder pipe out of here. It's not going to do us any good. Mostly it's because, again, it's easier to mess with it when it's on the ground now, or it's kind of up in the air rather, than when it's all sitting flat on the ground. So let me get you set up. We'll start pulling all this apart. Okay. Slightly new plan. We're going to leave the exhaust attached to it till I get it out, the whole subframe down, which again is not the way I would normally do it given what we're doing, but
some circus monkey who installed this exhaust system welded the studs for the hangers to the frame, which is fine. It's actually really nice. Then they tightened the nuts down on the hangers, and then they tack welded the nuts. Like, what did this exhaust system do to them where they were like so worried? Like, why? It makes no sense. So I'm just gonna start attacking the motor mounts because that's what I can do. They won't be accessible once this is on the ground. The exhaust we can mess with when it's on the ground. Makes no sense. We got that AC line disconnected. Last thing I need to do, I keep saying that, but keep running into little things you need to remember to pull off. Lower radiator hose, and I'm not well versed in the 4-cylinder, but I think after that, because I believe they tee in to the coolant for the heater core, yeah, they bring it back right here. So it's this hose, which is the lower hose. That upper's already been disconnected earlier. And this one. This is, I guess, the lower radiator hose to the body for the heater. So staying disconnected from the intake up there or down here, whichever. The intake's probably easier. And I think we're good at that point. I think we're entirely disconnected. So let me start pulling these hoses and we can start dropping this whole thing out the bottom. So I've got back radiator hose off. That lower one that went to the intake manifold is now disconnected. So now, last thing to do as far as disassembly is I need to go ahead and pull the rear wheels off, and we're going to hang the calipers up in the body, and we're going to disconnect the struts from the body. Once that's done, we can start lowering the whole car down and start pulling everything out. Alright. You've seen me mess with these brakes before. I'm not going to go into detail about them very much, but basically what we need to do is we got our old friend the parking brake. We need to get this guy unhooked and get the spring out. Screwdriver. Spring off. Let's see if we can. We gotta press. There's some little tangs on here to push it back through. Figure out which one's holding it up, because kind of thankfully, but also kind of badly, these things are, when they're old, usually only one of the tangs is even holding it anymore. Alright, that's disconnected. That can go wherever, really, it doesn't matter. Now we're going to take this brake off. And the reason we're doing this way and leaving these things on or connected to the body of the car is because the fewer systems that we have to disconnect or mess with when we're doing this, the better. If I can hang these, we don't have to bleed brakes, and I don't have to add fluid to the brake system. I don't have to worry about clamping things off. I don't have to worry about any of that. A lot of times when you're building or taking things apart, if you can, in this case, a couple of reasons we're not going to do this, but a lot of times, if you can leave your AC compressor hooked up, if your AC still works, and just hang it out of the way, great. That's why we hung the clutch slave cylinder. Although, truthfully, it's more of a, on this car, on Fieros, it's kind of a pipe dream. Every time I've ever, I like these little cars, but truthfully, they have one of the worst hydraulic clutch systems I've ever seen. Like, if you look at the car sideways, you'll have to bleed the clutch, and that's usually a nightmare. So, but we left it hooked up all the same, mostly just to keep it from dribbling fluid too badly. Well, I think I saw, it looks like it and the master might have seeped some brake fluid while they were sitting. It's a little weird, but I think they did. In case I pull this off. Okay. Pull the bolts out of it. Ooh. These brakes have gotten hot. Gotta remember to take the parking brake off. But go here. Figure something out here. There we go, that'll do it. Let's go through that. Zip tie. Here. Alright, and now, still have to keep an eye on it. But now, hopefully, that'll remain in the car, and all this can come down separate, and then we don't have to mess with the brake system. So let me do the same thing on the other side, and we'll move on to kind of finally putting this thing on the ground and pulling the subframe bolts and actually lifting the car up and leaving the engine on the ground. So this is how we're going to pull this engine out of this car. Like I showed you, we disconnected everything back here. So that technically, this engine, transmission, and subframe are only connected to the body of the car by 4 bolts, one at each corner of the subframe. So what we do is, let's see if you can see, I have a floor jack with a large roofing timber at roughly mid-car. Like so. You can see the fuel tank and everything we were working with yesterday. Alright, we got the floor jack, and what we're going to do is when we lift it, it's going to come off these stands. We'll push the dollies forward. We'll rest the entire back of the car on those dollies. Subframe, wheel, or brake, hub bearings and everything. Whole back of the car can rest down on those. And once the weight is down, and it's off like it's supported, we'll reach under and undo the bolts for the subframe. Once they're loose, once they're out entirely, we'll begin to raise the car back up with the floor jack. And all the back of the car will stay on the ground, at least if you disconnected everything. You want to do it slowly and carefully so you can ensure that you don't break anything or nothing gets stuck. Now, if you're like me, the first time someone explains this to you, you're going to say, I choose life, and you're not going to do this. But I'm telling you, from years and years and years of doing this, this can be done safely. It can be done repeatedly. Your dollies are basically consumable. Those claim that they're good for 1,000 pounds each. We're going to see. I'm skeptical because they tend to crack and break. You basically get one good use out of them. But they're $20-something at Harbor Freight. Roofing timber doesn't cost anything, and you can reuse that thing over and over and over again. Hopefully you don't have to, but you can. So, but let me get you mounted up, and we'll start doing this whole little thing, and you'll see how it all works. Clear the stands. Try to get them as close or as far as you can under the car. Will do the most good. Or their box with the frame. And slowly, gently, make sure you're clear. Slowly, gently. Start letting the car go. Make sure I'm on the dollies. And it's probably going to dribble coolant and stuff on you now, but it's just how it is. A little bit, so it's generally supported. It's not going to fall. So we're now all on the back of the dollies. And a good sign, they haven't fractured yet. That's good. But I need to start pulling bolts. So I think I'll start with the front two on either side. They're cross bolts that go through the fore end. and then we'll pull backs. They're vertical. Once they're out, we can go back up with the car, and everything here, all the engine, transmission, all this stuff should just stay on the ground. Should. That's how it tends to work. You might occasionally, and when we go back to reinstalling everything, have to have a second floor jack so you can kind of move this subframe, support it up, down a little bit, forward, aft, up, down. But it's, I mean, it'll come out. So we get the bolts, if memory serves, those are like 18 and 19 or 19 mil. So, start lifting and find out if anything is still hanging on. I'm just going to break the top for that. Alright, let's see if we forgot to disconnect anything. Kind of a dance as you go up with this thing. Like I said, be careful with it. It's heavy, but you kind of got to keep periodically checking, make sure nothing's hanging up. Big things to check for really is, firstly, is that your strut towers drop free, and that your actual connection points at the back and the front of the subframe to the body drop free. If they do, it's pretty much easy at that point. There's nothing in here that would actually hold it. It might break. It's not going to keep it in the car, and you can kind of just keep working your way around, make sure everything comes loose. Just keep going up a bit. You are going to need a serious jack for this. This one's a 3-ton Harbor Freight Daytona. But you're going to need a pretty solid, serious jack for this. That's going to drag the body all the way out, isn't it? Not a problem on 85s. We will probably have to take this off too. We'll probably get it out that way. I just don't know if we'll be able to put it back in that way. But everything else engine-wise, appears to be coming loose. Now you can, depending on your comfort level, and we're getting there, we're figuring it out. You can take these struts off, you'll have a little more clearance room for the engine to come out. But what you're waiting for is enough height, and we're not quite there yet, for the whole engine combo to be able to slide out the side. Okay, so you can buy yourself a little bit of room by removing these, but truthfully these are generally at the same height as the top of the valve cover or the intake manifold anyway. So you kind of need to go that high. Be careful and keep in mind the way this is. This is why you need a big 3-ton jack to go up with. That's fun. But you need to make sure, because it's gonna lose all its weight distribution. You need to make sure it doesn't roll away on you. But so keep going up with it. I'll feel a little more comfortable with a rock on it. So we're pretty much there. So I'm going to go just a little bit higher. It should come pretty much free. Alright, you saw that. Shock tower busted free. Then a little under. Be like a 1/16 of an inch. One more pump. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead. Make sure you got plenty of room. You need to kind of plan out your space. Trying to hit your jack. But that is a removed Fiero subframe and engine combination. And now we can start working with it, switching parts over, get all ready to go back in here. Next thing I'm going to do, I'll got it up. We're going to need room to work, but also I don't want to leave it just dangling in the wind. I'm going to put jack stands underneath the posts, or the post itself, and lower it back down on the post. And then that'll support the actual car while we do everything else. general, you need to know your floor jack pretty well. What you can get away with, what angles it's going to do, how smoothly you need to release it. You need to know it pretty well. Now bear in mind also, as you come down, this thing is going to be trying to push and pull a little bit like that. Just bear in mind that it's willing to try and do that. And there we go. But I would still leave the floor jack under here because it's not hurting anything. Rock it, make sure you're safe. But it's reasonably solid. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I'm going to put some oil dry under here, clean it up a bit. We can get on to actually swapping the engine transmission over. Alright, so this is our whole drivetrain assembly that's now been removed. And all we need to do is now pull that old engine off and swap it out, right? So we basically got this Dr. Seuss looking pipe that runs down to the rest of the exhaust system. This needs to come loose. I'll start soaking that with WD-40 and we'll pull the nuts out down here. This whole pipe should come off. And we'll leave it connected to the engine because we're not really worried about that. That's all got to come out. But since we already took all of our motor mounts, motor mount there, mount here, and this one down here loose from the frame, there's actually nothing really supporting all of this anymore or keeping it attached to it. So all we got to do is disconnect it from the exhaust system, bring the boom over here, hook the whole thing up and lift it, and once it's off, we can pull the bolts that secure what's called the bell housing, the transmission bell housing, to the engine. Basically all like in here and stuff. Once this thing is lifted up off, we can pull the whole engine out and off of it and bolt the new one to the transmission, drop the whole thing back on here. We also need to pop the CV axles free with like a pry bar. It's easy. So give me a minute, let me get you set up and I'll start pulling parts off this thing. I'm actually suspicious, and I'm hoping and praying I don't think I'm gonna get this lucky. It's like I was talking about earlier, having to switch the lower exhaust system off this thing, and someone did some stuff at the back. I'll show you a little bit that makes it harder to do. It's easier to do with it out of the car. Once I've got the engine dropped on here, I'm curious because the angle of this, I don't know. If I get really, really lucky, this might line up with the V6 downpipe. If it does, I'd much rather use this exhaust system because it's actually been running. I know it doesn't have mouse houses in it and stuff like that, and I know that it's like the cat's in good shape, the muffler's in good shape. I think it's even got, I think this is like an ocelot system from Fiero store, so it'd be nice to use it, but we'll see. I don't think I'm going to be lucky enough. I don't think that's going to line up right. It'd be really cool if it did, but I doubt it will. But in any case, so that's loose now. So that's all able to come off. In the meantime, we'll just stick these, thread these back. No, I can't do it on the other side. I'll just set them aside. But these probably will be compatible with the other exhaust system, which is good. Actually, really happy with these dollies. They're not like breaking like every other time I've ever used Harbor Freight dollies. I'm sure they will at some point. For now. The CV axle. Yep, it's been dribbled. It's loose from it though. And same deal over here. So we have oil dry. Would have been nice to save some of the synchro mesh, but what are you gonna do? Now, go back. But now that that's been broken loose, I can pull this axle out. So it's now out of here, and the whole thing can kind of come up and forward and slide past it. Oh, it's broke. I almost wonder, although surely that isn't enough to throw the... I wonder if that's why it was dying at stoplights. That manifold is broke. Like, why did we not hear that? Let me bring it, I'll show you this. Look at this thing. Like, I mean, it's fractured. It would have been getting, and the oxygen sensor's right here. So, I don't know. But there's a chance this thing was, what was happening is it's getting a bad air to fuel mixture. And that's what was wrong with it. I mean, we're a little too far along to turn back, so it's going to get a V6 swap, but I almost wonder, I don't know how we didn't hear that when it was running. It's crazy. And really, maybe I'd expect to see more soot. They're really not that bad. So I don't know. But they look really bad. So, I don't know. It's coming out. But I just wanted to show you that. That's kind of wild. Someone take this out of that. Hooked over there. Go. Broken anyway. Alright, so let's see what all we forgot to look. A little higher and pull in. And of course we've got gear oil on the ground, that's fun. Somehow gasoline leaking from the TBI. Why is anyone doing antifreeze stuff? That's pretty cool. Man, if I could go back in time, I still think this thing's better with a V6 swap, but those cracked manifolds, I'm suspicious. All right, well that is out. So basically, this whole motor goes set aside, and I mean, I'll probably post it for sale because truthfully, I rebuilt this thing only 1,000 miles ago, so the motor's good. And you throw an exhaust manifold on it, it might be just fine. But that's that. So we get it on the ground. We'll start pulling bell housing bolts out of it, and then that guy will get bolted to it. Clutches are interchangeable between V6 and 4-cylinder cars, and I don't have a bunch of spare pressure plate bolts laying around, so let's see if I can pull these out to reuse them. Yes, reusing parts. In there. Come on. Come out. Any more? There's got to be. There we go. One more. Wow. Okay. Might have to do something about that. Nope. I just got to have to set you down somewhere. I'm going to jam something in there to hold it. See what shape this clutch is in. It's actually not that bad. Pressure plate. Really not that bad. Kind of expected it to be bad. Well, at least not great. But if you look at the clutch. So these are the rivets that hold it together. And you can tell they're actually, it doesn't look like a lot, but that's a lot of meat left on that clutch. That's pretty good. And actually, the pressure plate, it's got some, like, that's what I call hot spots on it. But I've definitely seen worse. Definitely seen worse. Especially given that Amy was kind of learning to drive stick on this. It's really not that bad. I mean, I don't know, we'll see. I've got another used clutch. We'll figure out if we're going to use it or not. It's not that bad of a clutch. Okay. Now this can go in the corner, be a parts thing. I am going to hack a little bit off the harness. I need to switch over. The later alternator that we're using does need the connector off this, I believe, and a couple other little things. But other than that, you can go in the corner, you can sit there for a little bit till we'll figure out what to do. In the meantime, I got pressure plate bolts, which I need. Alright guys, we're getting off to kind of a little bit of a late start today, but I've got everything kind of pulled apart here. We've got the old engine right there, we've got a new one right here, transmission on the ground, and we've got our hoist in place so we can pick this thing up. Next job is going to be go ahead and throw the starter on here. I've already got it pulled off the old engine. We'll bolt it on here. Then we're going to pick this whole thing up and move it, hang it in the air so we can bolt the flywheel and the clutch on it, and then bolt the transmission in the back. Once all of that's done and we've got pretty much everything assembled, except for the exhaust manifolds, so I've got the transmission mounted on it, and the new front motor mount, we'll go ahead and position the old subframe on top of the legs of the hoist and lower everything down into place, drop it in, probably put a couple securing bolts in it, and then kind of have to play the thing with the floor jack again to kind of jack it and rock it kind of one way or another to get it off. Once it's off, then we're back to again a nice easy to roll thing, and we can just put it back under the car. But in the meantime, got to get the accessories put on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and set you up, and I'll just start working on it and see how fast we can get this thing thrown together. Peace out. Now, a lot of times, in fact, every time I've ever put a starter on one of these, there's always been shims. I don't have any spare shims laying around, and the 4-cylinder it was on didn't have any. So we're just going to go ahead and install it. It will hopefully not be too tight to the clearance for the flywheel, but in the worst case, if it has a problem, we just take the bolts out, slip some shims in. Hopefully we don't have to do that. So starter. You can have it. Bolt started. Of course, I don't really understand why. No. Here. It's a lot easier to do like this than it is when this thing's dangling in the air. Yeah, different starter. This one. Is that? Go in. Up in there. That's a starter. This wire is going to run up that way to the battery at some point. Okay. Look at that little piece of sheet metal is going to stop anything. Makes me feel better. Okay. Go up with it. Once we got a little bit of tension on it, we'll release the bolts from the back of it, holding it to the stand. Okay. So we got some tension on it now because I don't want to. It's going to fight this thing all the way. It's getting trapped in it, so go ahead and pull these out. First time this thing's been off the stand in several years. That's gonna be like a 19. Okay, so typically when you're going to install one of these rear main seals, you'll find that there's a tool that you're supposed to have. It's like a plastic seal or I guess stretcher, so to speak, so that when this goes over, it kind of keeps it open. I don't have one of those because for whatever reason this kit didn't come with one. Hope that freeze plug's fine. Yeah, we'll say that's fine. All right. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and just grease it on all the sides, and we'll tap it in with a small punch and a hammer. As long as it goes in nice and even, pretty much okay. We just want to make sure that it's actually, I'll only grease it on the inside. I don't want to mess with the exterior of it too much. But it's a Chevrolet product. These things leak. We're really just kind of doing the best we can. Yeah, enough said. You can go read the thousands and thousands of articles and soap operas on rear main seals and how they never seal. They always leak. It's always installer error somehow. Yet every one of them, once they leave an accredited shop, is then suddenly leaking again. And will they just do that? Yeah. At the end of the day, just get it in there. Make sure it's in. Try not to mess it up on your way in either. If you have the old one, ideally that's kind of the way you want to do it, because then you can install this thing and use the old one to hammer it in. In our case, we don't really have that luxury. So, mine didn't come with a tool. Really sucks that it didn't. Because I already went through my box. There's no seal driver tool or anything here. Trying to work our way around. Punch. There it is. Just gonna work my way around, lightly tapping it. Make sure I stay to this outer edge, not in the actual lip, but in the kind of harder outer edge. Just working it in. You'll hear the tone change as it bottoms out. So, go all the way around. It's nice and flush. And it's got a little bit of grease on it, which is a good thing. That'll help it. Hopefully when we first start this thing, it won't run dry. Like a lot of the steps we've been taking with this whole build, is just trying to make sure that for that first, right when it fires up, nothing is dry, nothing's riding hard against anything, so it can, until the oil pressure gets in there and can actually smooth things out. Alright. Next, now that's done. Next we're going to put the flywheel and the clutch on. And we'll go from there. Alright, if you're familiar with watching any of this stuff, you know that I'm not a big fan, or rather, I don't tend to do things right. But, and here would normally be no exception, but I will attempt to do it a little bit right, but I'll compromise by using some thread locker that is so old, it's probably not good. So it's basically the same. I thought there was thread locker in here. Maybe we're not going in with thread locker. Apparently we're not. It's not in there. Okay. Best practice is to put a thread locker on your flywheel bolts, because obviously if they come loose, bad things happen. Personally, I've never actually done that, ever. And I've always gotten away with it. And in fact, the engine that's in the black car, if I'm not mistaken, if I recall correctly, only has 5 flywheel bolts in it instead of 6. So, I'm telling you, there are some things you can probably get away with, especially with the raging 140 horsepower this thing makes, which is clearly not a lot. But I've got flywheel bolts, so get these in. And these are almost all replaced ones because I didn't have the old ones. I only had a couple of old ones because this engine didn't come with any. So they're also a couple different lengths, but they're all flywheel bolts. That should be fine. So run them down. And yes, there's a torque spec for that. I don't know it. And I've always been able to just drive them on with electric impact and be fine. So it should be okay. So next thing we're going to do is go and throw the clutch on. While all the hardcore people who claim to know what they're doing are gonna, and are not working on cars currently, are throwing things at their screen. Okay. Next is the clutch. So next is the clutch. So this is our used old exity clutch disc. We go on here, and this is an old pressure plate. These came out of one of my engines, I don't know which, that died violently. But they have low mileage, they're crusty, but they'll work. But that's what we're going to do. So, and I've given this a great deal of thought, and by that I mean about 2.5 minutes, that it has roughly the same amount of wear as the Luck brand clutch, which is kind of just a production grade economy clutch. It has about the same amount of wear. So with that being the case, we'll just go ahead and, go with this one, because it's about the same as far as wear, and it's a little bit, it's It's a spicier name. Exhibit. So you're also supposed to have a proper clutch alignment tool. I don't have one of those because I'm using a used clutch. This is just a 1/2 inch extension. Stick it in the back of the crank just to hold it up for a minute, because we're going to need to make sure that the clutch is at least somewhat aligned so that the transmission will actually be able to bolt up. I might look in a second, see if I have a tool. I'm pretty certain I don't have a clutch alignment tool for one of these. It's been a very long time since I've had to do one, and my days of hanging on to like trophies like that are pretty far behind me. Mostly because I break stuff so much. And I've moved a few times. I've moved, since a couple times since I've had to have one of these out. Okay, so as I discussed, I don't have the correct clutch tool. I looked. Basically, it would be the same as having something like this, but it would have the little splines on it that line up with the clutch itself. But I've done this a bunch of times too. So effectively, as long as we have all the bolts in the flex or in the pressure plate, it's not going anywhere. It's going where it's going to be. If you take your 1/2 inch, because in this case, now this may not work for everything, but in this case, the hole on the back of the crankshaft is roughly about a 1/2 inch drive size, a tiny bit bigger, but close enough. And as long as you can center this like so, you're going to be close enough as you tighten it down with it holding the center. But then that should pressure the clutch disc in the right place, and then you should be close enough that you should be able to stab the transmission. Worst case, you can always loosen these up and move it, but this is kind of how we got to go about it because I don't have the correct tool. What I'm going to do is just, like I said, eyeball it roughly centered and start tightening. And don't go to full kill like first time. Just start pressuring it down. And you want to see that basically you hold your 1/2 inch drive roughly centered in the clutch. It's roughly centered in this pressure plate. Oh yeah, that kind of ghetto. But in any case, we should be good now. We're good now. We can tighten these down. We should be centered up. We can also shine a flashlight in there, kind of get an idea. Should be pretty much there though. What torque spec is that? That one. So again, like I said, if you really want to be careful and it's your personal build, you can get either stick a screwdriver in here or something, or they make like a big flywheel holder tool, and you can get in here with your torque wrench and you can set these to whatever they're supposed to be. If I had to guess, the flywheel to crank is probably something like 60 pound-feet, and these guys are probably something like 30 because they're pretty small. But just tighten it. I mean, if you have enough vibration going through this thing to rattle these loose, you're probably not driving this car anymore, because it's probably so violent your teeth are coming out. So I can tell you, like, yes, if I were doing this on someone else's car as a customer, or if I was still working in a shop, I'd expense out a little bit of Loctite, and I'd probably make some attempt to at least look up the torque specs. But I can tell you, on this platform, I've done it enough times, at least for now, it's just for me. For the break-in period and for the period that's going to matter, it's for me. So I'm really not worried about it. But that's how you do that. And so next thing we're going to do is you pick up the transmission and see if we can stab this thing. And it should lock right in here. And then we can start putting bolts in it, and it should hang right off the back. And then we're getting pretty close. It's kind of exciting at this point. You're starting to actually go back together, as opposed to just, constantly taking things apart.
I'm dropping it. Find a bolt. Get one started. Oh God, it was tight. This is good. Have fun. These are 18s. Something you need to be very careful about when you're doing this too. It's okay to use them like this to start it. You need to make sure that the whole time this thing is coming down straight. If at any point it starts to bind, don't just use these to drive it in, because you can damage, or you can seriously damage a lot of stuff. Use the bolts to kind of sort of guide it down, but if they're actively like getting hard to turn and this thing's binding up, not going down straight, you need to figure out why, because there could be any number of reasons and all of them are not good.
So I think in my case, most of what's causing the problem is just minor issues with it being a little twisted on there. Good? Yeah, I can. Cool. And you can see now we've got it actually cinched down. These other ones just spin right down, really, for the most part. So we don't have any binding or fighting going on. It means everything fits right. If any part of this is not fitting, you need to figure out why. There could be a lot of reasons, but bottom line is it's not going to work. You would go to all the effort to put this in the car, and you're going to end up pulling it back out again because something's dragging or fighting or not wanting to work. You're not going to be happy if you got to do that. I can tell you, right? But we now have a transmission bolted to an engine, which is more than we had when we started today. That's pretty good. They don't have to be insane, but make sure your flywheel bolt or your bell housing bolts are tight. You don't want to coming loose. But truthfully, there really should never be a lot of any kind of force put on the bell housing, really, that would necessitate them being extremely tight. But alright, we've got that done. So now we can start looking at getting this put back on the subframe and then mock up for everything else. This is coming together nicely.
Alright guys, I think that's going to just about do it for part one. I had planned on going a little bit farther today. I hadn't really been breaking it up day to day, but today's actually day 3 working on this. What slowed me down, or what's stopping us today, is this. This is the motor mount that I ordered for this swap. Now, it is correct, and it would be correct if this were an earlier application, but because we're using an 88 subframe, we have to use 88 mounts. This, I know from a lot of experience, this was listed when I ordered it as a mount for a 1988 V6. This would have been the front mount. This only fits an 85 through an 87, the earlier subframe, the earlier mount. This big horseshoe mount that's under here is going to take a much larger, well, these are hydraulic filled too, but it's a much larger mount. And there actually is one, I'm pretty certain, that would work attached to that 4-cylinder sitting down there. But that thing, the problem is that one is already leaking. It's in bad shape. I know the last time I had it out, I didn't replace it. It makes all the sense in the world for the 20 bucks that thing would cost just to replace it. And realistically, these back ones that I was going to reuse should probably be replaced too, because I know from experience that the motor mounts are a huge bear to do when this thing's in the car. I've been trying to shave money wherever I can, but it's right there. It's just not going to happen. We're going to have to order a mount. If we're going to have to order a mount, we might as well go ahead and order some other mounts and maybe some hoses and a couple other odds and ends. But we got a lot done. In this episode, we got the fuel pump switched over. So now it's got a 6-cylinder pump that'll feed this thing, no problem. We've got the whole engine and subframe removed. We got the 4-cylinder out, mostly stripped down. We have the transmission from it bolted up to the 6-cylinder and ready to go pretty much. And we're getting close. I'd say probably another weekend push and it'll pretty much be there. But that being said, I've got plenty of footage. Even this is going to probably go over an hour. So I figure I'll stop it here and this will make episode 1. So thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy watching this stuff. It helps me out, makes me want to keep doing it, because it is a phenomenal amount of work to do this, and it is a immensely bigger job also having to record it at the same time. So it's been fun, but I do appreciate you guys watching. So that being said, thank you for watching. You guys have a good rest of your day.